Poetry writing is a great tool to use in order to teach writing to our English language learners. In this course, we will examine what poetry is, why we should use poetry writing to teach English, and some factors that we need to consider when planning a poetry writing lesson. We will also look at a sample poetry writing lesson plan, as well as different types of poetry our students can write. Poetry is an expression of imagination, emotion, thought, and experience through meaning, sound, imagery, and rhythmic language choices. The language choices may follow a prescribed pattern or deliberately have no pattern at all. The following are some great reasons why we can use poetry writing in our classrooms. It's fun. It allows students to express their own ideas within a set structure or format. It gives students the opportunity to be creative and artistic. It helps students to develop creative language. It forces students to write accurately and precisely in order to express themselves. It gives students the opportunity to revise and refine their own writing. It helps students learn to write well. Choosing activities depends on many factors. What level are your students? What is the average age of the students? Why are the students studying English? What should the students be able to produce at the end of the exercise? What is the focus of the exercise? Is it tense, structure, or usage? Warning: teachers need to ensure that students feel personally involved if they want the poetry writing lesson to have lasting value. In order for the students to accept that poetry writing is more than just fun, the teacher needs to be clear about which skills he or she is trying to develop. If the objective is not clear, the students may not feel motivated to participate. Teachers also need to provide constructive feedback to help students refine their language choices. Without this feedback, the lesson may be perceived as being meaningless. To begin, ask the students what a poem is. Do they like poetry? Do they have a favorite poem or poet? Who is a famous poet from their country? Have students work in small groups of 4. Each group has one example of the type of poem to be written. They must complete the following tasks. Identify the structure or form of the poem. What are the parts of speech in each line? And report orally and informally to the rest of the class on the feeling or tone of the poem. Identify any relationships among the different lines of the poem. Students can use dictionaries as necessary to figure out unfamiliar words. Write the structural form of the poem on the board or screen, or present it in a handout. As a class, brainstorm possible words or phrases that fit within one of the lines of the poem. For example, with the Cinquain poem, brainstorm synonyms that can be used for the first and last lines. Put the pairs up on the board as suggestions. For example, for a Cinquain poem, you could have vacation, holidays, artist, creator, Paris, paradise, life, journey. Choose one of the brainstorm sets of words and write a sample poem together as a class on the board or overhead screen. Working individually with the template created in the second step, students write one or more poems on the subject of their choice. If time, have students share their poems with the class or in small groups. The following are different types of poems that you can use to teach your students using the same lesson plan as previously mentioned. Let's start off with an acrostic poem. An acrostic poem has the first letter of a series of words making a new word. Each new word should be an adjective or a phrase that describes the main word. A variation to the acrostic poem is that students use their name for the first letter of each word. Let's look at this example using the word teacher. Tough, enthusiastic, ambitious, caring, helpful, energetic, resourceful. Next, we'll look at a cinquain poem. A cinquain poem is a 5-line poem that is diamond-shaped. The order of content for each line is as follows: 1 noun, 2 adjectives, 3 gerunds, 1 full sentence, and finally a synonym for the first noun. Water, cool, clear. Invigorating, refreshing, sustaining. A thing that provides energy. Life. Next, we'll look at a diamante poem. A diamante poem is similar to a cinquain, except that it has more lines and more word classes. A diamante poem is a 7-line poem that is diamond-shaped. The order of content for each line is as follows: 1 noun, 2 adjectives, 3 gerunds, 4 nouns, 3 gerunds, 2 adjectives, and 1 noun. As you can see, the poem is equally divided into 2 parts. The top half and the first 2 nouns of the 4th line are related to one topic, and the last 2 nouns of the 4th line and the bottom half are related to another topic. Let's take a look at another example. Winter, rainy, cold. Skiing, skating, sledding. Mountains, wind, breeze, ocean. Swimming, surfing, scuba diving. Sunny, hot, summer. Next, we'll take a look at the haiku. The haiku is a Japanese poem format. It is an unrhyming poem. It has 3 lines with a total of 17 syllables. The first line has 5 syllables, the second line has 7, and the third has 5 syllables. Haiku can be used to describe something, although the subject of the haiku is not mentioned in the poem. Or it can be used to convey the mood of a situation or a setting. To have your students write a haiku, you can assign the subject or the mood, or the students can choose it themselves. Let's take a look at an example of the haiku. Green leaves softly shake. Pieces of yellow light jump. Branches creak and groan. Next, we'll look at a metaphor poem. Each line contains a different prescribed metaphor describing one person or object. You assign all the metaphor categories, and the students will choose a person or object about which to write. Here is an example. You assign the following metaphor categories: a food, a beverage, a season, a type of transportation, an animal, a type of flower. A student then wrote the following metaphor poem describing his or her mother. Fresh baked bread filling the house with a sweet aroma. A hot apple cider on a cold day. The green of new life pushing up through the last snow. A graceful yacht catching the evening breeze. A koala bear, soft and warm. Your brilliant yellow petals light up the garden. Next, we'll look at a limerick. A limerick is a humorous poem with 5 lines. The last word of the first, second, and 5th lines rhyme. The last word of the 3rd and 4th lines rhyme. The first, second, and 5th lines have 3 beats followed by a silent beat. For example, da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum. The 3rd and 4th lines have only 2 beats. For example, da-dum, da-da-dum. Because of the distinctive rhythm pattern, Limericks are particularly useful to our students for teaching the rhythm of English. Let's give it a try. There was an old man from Peru who dreamed he was eating his shoe. He woke in the night with a terrible fright and found out that it was quite true. Lastly, we'll look at a sonnet. A sonnet is more complex than any of the other poems introduced thus far. It should only be used with your advanced classes. A sonnet has 14 lines divided into 4 sections called quatrains. The first 3 quatrains have 4 lines each. The last quatrain has 2 lines. A sonnet has a strict rhyming scheme. The first quatrain is AB, AB. The second quatrain is CD, CD. The third quatrain is EF, EF. The fourth quatrain is G, G. The rhythm of a sonnet is called iambic pentameter. This means that each line contains 10 beats, alternating between stressed and unstressed syllables. Each quatrain has a specific role. The first quatrain introduces the subject of the sonnet. The second quatrain develops the subject or theme. The third quatrain rounds off the subject or theme. And the fourth quatrain concludes the sonnet. Shakespeare has written some of the most beautiful and famous sonnets. Here is an example of Shakespeare's Sonnet 18, or also called, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. By thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. I hope that you feel confident in using poetry as a viable option for teaching writing to your students. It is a fun and creative way for your students to develop their English language usage.